supplies while you're working on something as important as yourself. I hope that you will enjoy this time for dedicated practice. You may even decide to keep up your practice after these 6 sessions. So why not invest in quality tools? You might be creating a work of art that you will want to keep for a long time, or perhaps even hang on your wall. You may especially want to consider that if you already know that you're an artistically inclined or crafty individual. Now, that being said, you absolutely do not have to be an artist to enjoy or benefit from this course. And if you're not in a place right now to invest in the higher quality materials, or if you're not sure if you might want to keep up your practice after this course, you may want to give it a shot with some more basic tools first. Some folks may feel pressure to create something amazing if they put out a bunch of money on supplies. So if this is you, you may want to try it out first. That choice is up to you. The first thing that you'll need is a surface. So you'll be working on your painting over the course of the 6 sessions. You only need one surface for all 6, but you might find a nice deal to get something in bulk. So my favorite thing to paint on is a gallery wrapped canvas. Those are the ones that are at least 1 inch thick, and 1.5 inches is really nice. If you choose to go with a gallery wrapped canvas, you will have options at the end for what you might like to do with the sides. Some people paint the sides all one color, either white or black. But one interesting idea that I love when painting on a canvas is to continue the painting onto the side of the canvas. It just gives it an added je ne sais quoi. By continuing the painting on the sides, I feel like it frees me up from having to have that painting framed professionally. I just can hang it on the wall as is when I'm finished painting. So you can choose whatever surface you'd like to paint on. You may have a panel or something hanging around that you might like to use, or you may like to use a canvas like this from your local art store. It's truly up to you. During this course, I'm going to be painting on a canvas panel, so it's a little bit lighter than a canvas, but it's got the same material and it's got that same first layer of gesso on it to give you a good start for your work of art. Now, when it comes to medium, choosing your medium, I'm going to be demonstrating this process using the Golden brand fluid acrylics. This is what they look like. I love these paints. However, this is a little bit more on the higher end of supplies. You could also use any kind of acrylic paint. I also have this other brand that I like to use sometimes, which is Montmartre. And yeah, this is just your regular acrylic paint. You're going to need some paintbrushes. You'll need a mix of both synthetic and natural brushes for this course. An easy way to get started is to buy a set of each. Once you get a feel for it, and if you decide you want to keep up this type of practice, you may wish to purchase some individual brushes in key sizes or shapes. So for synthetic brushes, you're going to want at least a few round brushes and probably some flat, filbert, or perhaps some other shapes. Let's bring these up to the camera for you all to see. Those are synthetic brushes. Once we get into pattern making, let's say you're painting a tree, you'll want to find a brush that is the shape of a leaf. You'll also want at least one fine liner brush. Let's see, this is what a fine liner brush looks like. You'll want to use that for outlines and highlights. 3 different sizes of fine liner brushes would be a great step if you can get a few. And while you're shopping for brushes, if there is one that you see that makes your heart sing, feel free to get that one too. The suggestions I give you here will help you to get set up, but don't feel limited by them. For the natural brushes, you're going to want to get stiff, round hog hair brushes in a few different sizes. The stiffer and wirier, the better. That will give you an idea of what they look like. I also have some newer ones here that'll give you an idea of what they will look like in the store or online if you're buying your supplies online. All of the brushes I've described here can be purchased from any art supply store. It's great to support small local business if there's a local art supply store where you live. Otherwise, you can buy them from online art supply stores. And if your budget is not that big, with some creative thinking, you can also get these items at, say, your local dollar store. Now, you're also going to need a palette. You'll need something that you can mix your colors on, if that's something you want to do. You'll also need to put the paint on the palette ahead of putting it on your brushes so that you can master the dry brushing technique we'll be using. If you have a small old window or picture frame made out of glass, that might be really nice. Or you could even use a plastic plate. That's what I've got here. I've been using this for a few years, and a trick that I learned from my teacher, Angela Golad, is that one way that we can help the environment to prevent all of this excess paint from getting into our water supply is by letting the paint dry on your palette when you're finished painting. What you will notice over time is that your palette might get kind of bumpy, added depth on here, and that's totally okay. It's not going to interfere with your future colors or color mixing. And if it bothers you even, you can peel the paint off, because once it becomes dry, it becomes essentially plastic. So that's just another way that we can prevent unnecessary paint from ending up in our water supply. You're also going to need a water jar to either rinse your brushes quickly if it's just a little bit of paint that you've used, or to simply sit your brushes in until you have a chance to fully wash them at the end of your practice. You can use an old jar that you might have around, or even grab a container out of your recyclables. I like to use an old mason jar. That's what I've got around here. Now, you may instinctively want to fill this up with water when you're getting ready to paint. You might be thinking, oh, well, if I fill it all the way up, then I don't have to rinse the water as often. And while that may be true, I'm going to recommend a trick to you that I learned from Angie, where you only fill the water actually an inch or two in the jar. And what this is going to do is protect your brushes, because when you have your brush in there, let's say it's sitting in there for a while, the water level is going to be below where your brushes are glued together, so it prevents any loosening of the brushes. However, if your brushes do come apart, you can easily just put a little bit of glue and then connect them again. You're going to want to have a floor, table, perhaps even wall covering to protect your surfaces while you're painting. If you're going to be painting at an easel like me, you may want to consider putting something on the wall as well. When we go over to the painting area, I'll show you the drop cloth that I have by my easel. It's going to help you because even if you're being very careful, you may have some splashes and spills. And so this helps to prevent getting paint on your walls, on your floor. Yeah, old sheets or old newspapers can work for that too. You're going to want to have a rag or 2 rags handy while you're painting. It's good to have in case of spills, but I actually use a rag often to remove some of the paint from my brushes when we're using the dry brushing technique. An old towel or a face cloth could work. I've got these microfiber cloths, which I find work fairly well. You're going to want to have a spray bottle handy. We're going to use that for at least 1 step, sometimes more. If you have one that doesn't have a product that's harmful to your skin in it, you can reuse that. You can wash it out and have it ready for some water. If not, you can pick up a spray bottle from your local dollar store. That will work well. So you might want to have some additional mark making tools. So besides brushes, things that make other marks, items like stencils, plastic utensils. So I've got some stencils in my collection here that I might use. And yeah, I mentioned plastic utensils. Sometimes an old fork can create some interesting patterns. You can take a look in your recycling to find some really interesting options. I've got a variety of different sized circular or round caps here, which when dipped in paint will make a perfect circle. Sometimes you want to have that for pattern making. You might want to have a ruler. One interesting thing that makes a really cool pattern is old bubble wrap, if you have any of that laying around. So take a look in your recycling and be creative. See what you can come up with for additional mark making tools. You're going to want to have a journal or a notebook. I like these. These notebooks have both lined paper as well as a blank side that can be used for sketching. And so you'll want to have this notebook handy for any thoughts or ideas or reflections that come to you during the process of learning about yourself in this course, as well as ideas you may come up with for something you'd like to paint. This is what I mean by one side is blank for sketching and one side has lines for writing any ideas you might have. This is an example of a sketch that we'll do when we come to the meditation to bring in your image. And I wanted to show you this example of a sketch so that you can see it's really not, the most important thing is not having a perfect, photographic representation of what you want to paint, but really the most important things are getting all of the information down. So you might want to write some notes based on your sketch as well so that you can remember ideas that you had about your painting. Okay, next thing you're going to want to have is a pencil and eraser. And these are my favorite ones. The Staedtler pencil and this high polymer eraser. Those are just my favorite ones, but you can use whatever you have around, whatever you like. Charcoal or chalk. You might like to have a piece of chalk or a piece of charcoal. And that we're going to use during 2 steps. We'll use it when we write down our intention on our canvas, and we're also going to use it when we start marking out where things should go before we outline our image on the canvas. You're also going to want to have a Sharpie. Any kind of Sharpie will do. I like to use the Sharpie for writing my name as well as the name on the painting, the name of the painting on the back when I'm finished. However, the Sharpie is not necessary. You don't need to buy one of those for this. You're going to want to have some kind of brush cleaner. And I like this brush cleaner and preserver. I got this from my local art supply store. And I mean, this is maybe kind of fancy. You don't necessarily need this. You can also use any kind of dish soap. Painting clothes. You're going to want to put on your painting clothes. These are clothes that you don't mind getting paint on while you're working on your practice. At one point in my life, when I was painting every day, pretty much all of my clothes had paint on them, and it really didn't matter to me at that point. However, you may care about getting paint on your clothes, and you may not want to have paint on your clothes. Acrylic paint essentially becomes plastic when it dries, so it's pretty impossible to get it out of your clothes. So make sure you're wearing clothes that you don't mind accidentally getting paint on. You may even want to consider an apron or a smock. And the last thing, I wanted to talk about some optional extras. So you might like to have some colored pencils or pastels or some other favorite medium that you have. You could use that in your notebook when you're working on your sketch, or any other ideas that might come up while you're working on your practice. But again, that's totally optional. You don't need that. So when you're getting ready to paint, anytime you're getting ready, you want to make sure that you've covered all of your surfaces with something to protect them from splashes and spills. You'll want to have your water jar filled with a couple of inches of water. Have your spray bottle, your rag, your palette, and your brushes handy. You may also want to have some of those additional mark-making tools ready. And finally, have your painting surface ready, whether you're painting on a table or an easel. Before you pour any paint, use your Sharpie to draw a circle on your palette about the size of a quarter. or an inch in diameter. The reason I suggest this is because paint is expensive. When you're learning and when you're just getting used to the idea, this circle will remind you that you only need a little bit at a time. This is going to help you avoid waste and to help you make your paints last a long time, as well as prevent as much as we can from going into the water supply or the landfill. So the only time you may need more than this on your palette is if you're mixing a custom color. If you want to use a color that doesn't come straight out of the bottle, you'll want to make sure you mix enough to do everything on your painting that should be that color, because when you try to remix a color after you've run out, it's very hard to match that color. So you're going to pour or squeeze onto your paint palette somewhere other than the circle that you've drawn. This will help to remind you as you go. Eventually, if you cover it up too, that's fine. When it's time to choose a paintbrush, I will tell you to grab either a synthetic or a natural brush, and I'll try to give you a bit of guidance on what I suggest for each step. As you're getting to know your brushes, and as you learn about these techniques, you may find yourself wondering which brush to choose. This is what I do when I'm trying to choose a brush. I take the brush in my hand and I take the brush in my dominant hand and I press the bristles against the palm of my non-dominant hand and rub it in circles. This allows you to feel the texture of that brush and to get in tune with yourself during your practice, so your painting will talk to you. So let your brushes tell you which one to pick. So in order to help you get used to the differences between them, let's take a closer look. So these are synthetic brushes. Essentially, synthetic brushes are made with plastic. They can be made with polyester, nylon, or a combination, or even lycra, rayon, or spandex. There are also sable brushes, which are natural, but that's typically out of range of most budgets. These synthetic brushes are pretty soft. The bristles tend to stick together when painting, so you get nice smooth lines. Because these brushes are so soft, over time they can get bent if they spend a lot of time being bent in your water, let's say. So if you use the synthetic brush and put it in your water, let's say you got distracted before washing and putting your brushes away, the combination of weight of the handle pressing down on the brushes and the water will likely result in your brush being permanently bent. Now, that's not to say that you won't be able to use it anymore. You might still be able to use it, but it might represent a challenge in certain situations. So just thinking about care for your brushes. Now, these natural hog hair brushes are much more stiff and wiry than the synthetic brushes. They tend to have a mind of their own, and you definitely will not get smooth lines with these brushes. So the bristles tend to go every which way as you're painting, especially in the circular dry brushing technique that I'll be teaching you. There will be times when you have, say, a smaller area you want to fill in with some color. Perhaps you would want a hog hair brush that's more tapered in. So both types of brushes will get stuck solid if you forget to rinse and wash your brushes. So as I said, acrylic paint is essentially plastic when it dries, and it's impossible to get out. So this goes also for your clothes, which I mentioned. When using the dry brushing technique, there's a certain magical quality to having very little paint on your brush. So this is another reason why I recommend having your rag nearby. You would dip your brush in the paint. Dip your brush in the paint and then move it to another section on your palette and move your brush against your palette in a circular motion in order to embed the brush with that paint. Then use your rag to remove some of the paint, maybe even most of the paint, depending on the size of the area that you're painting. Then you touch the canvas with the brush, and using circular scrubby motions, we're going to cover the area that we want. And what we're attempting to do here is to have some of the color we're applying sit on the top of the weave of the canvas. If you want to see what I mean, get up really close to your canvas and take a look at the pattern of the weave. It has squares in the canvas. So in this technique, when mastered, the new color you're adding will sit on the outside or top of those squares, and it allows some of the color underneath to show through. In this case, we'll be looking at round scrubby motions. So this is a technique you're going to want to use for organic items, for round, three-dimensional objects. However, if you are painting, say, a door, because it's flat and straight, then you might actually want to use a straight stroke. Those occasions are less common, I think. So you'll want to work on that technique of round scrubby motions. And when you feel like there isn't as much paint on your brush and you're almost finished an area, instead of reloading your brush with paint and then removing some on your rag, you can also just try pressing even harder with your brush, because it will get out some of the remaining bits of paint in that way. When you're ready to do another section, say you want to use another color, I actually don't rinse my brushes here in between colors. I use them until the color isn't transferring to the canvas anymore, and then switch colors and repeat. I do this because if I rinse my brush between colors, that brush is no longer going to be dry. It's going to be wet from the water. And B, there's a little bit of magic that happens when your color, the previous color, is influencing your next color. The tricks here are not to let your brushes sit too long between choosing colors, and when you're finished, when you're done your practice for the day, then to give them a really good wash. And if you're done with a brush for that particular painting session, but you're not done painting yet, this would be the time that you could set your brush in some water and then wait until you're finished and then wash all your brushes at once. So after you have finished your practice for that day, you can set your palette somewhere. With all the wet paint, just set your palette somewhere safe to fully dry. Take your water jar and brushes to the area you'll be using to wash your brushes. Some people like to do this in a workroom or a laundry sink if you have one. For me, it's just more convenient to do this in my kitchen sink. So when I demonstrate that, that's where we will be. The important thing there is if you are limited to rinsing your brushes, say in your kitchen sink or your bathroom sink, you'll want to be very careful not to get paint on your walls and to give your sink a really good rinse when you're finished. So we will at the end, I'll demonstrate how to wash and preserve your brushes and how to set everything up to dry. And then you'll be able to put your jar as well in a safe place and keep everything until you're ready to paint again.